Hello everyone, this is the introduction to the Photo Cubism Collage project, inspired by David Hockney and others. Cubism started out as a painting movement in the 1900s. It was made famous by artists such as Georges Braque and Pablo Picasso. In this painting by Georges Braque, you can see the interior of a room with a chair, a table, a painter's palette, paintbrushes, and a few other objects. One of the characteristics of Cubism you can see in this painting by Georges Braque of musical instruments. Artists of the movement simplified objects into basic geometric shapes. So the guitar is simplified into an oval and a rectangle. The sheet music in the background is made up of a bunch of rectangles. Another characteristic of Cubism is fragmenting objects into geometric shapes and then reconstructing them in ways that don't always match up, and using interlocking planes. So as you can see in this Pablo Picasso still life called Still Life with Bull's Skull, the objects themselves are on a table. The top of the table has been broken up into planes, and they are sitting in front of a window. You can see the landscape outside, different interlocking planes of blue and green. And the objects themselves are also kind of broken apart and reconstructed in some interesting ways that don't match up. Another characteristic of Cubism is distortion of reality by playing with perspective and multiple points of view. The rules of perspective were broken, creating impossible scenes with altered perspectives. In this painting by Pablo Picasso, you can see that you can see the edge of the table, you can see the top of the table. So the perspectives, the points of view, don't match up. In the 1960s, artist David Hockney started playing around with some of the concepts of Cubism, but using photographs instead of paint. He called his creations joinings. In this self-portrait of a young David Hockney, it's multiple photographs that have been printed out and glued together onto a surface. In the 1960s, they didn't have Photoshop. David Hockney is most well known as a painter, but he's also famous for his photocubism technique. In this example of David Hockney's work, you can see a still life with a guitar made using Polaroid photographs. And next to it, you see a Pablo Picasso painting. And you can really see the similarities, not only with the subject matter, but also with the color scheme. So David Hockney played around with same ideas, the distortions, the objects kind of being taken apart and reconstructed, seeing things from multiple perspectives. This is a much more complex piece of a street scene created with many more photographs. What David Hockney would do sometimes is stand in relatively the same spot and take photos, for example, pointing the camera down at his feet, and then kind of moving around and taking panoramic photos, individual photos of the scene, printing them out, and then collaging them together. And you can see that the edges don't match up, but they create a really interesting effect. Sometimes he would even make the edges straight on his artworks, and sometimes he would leave the edges jagged, as you can see on the bottom and the side of this piece. Here are two more examples of David Hockney's work. And here are some student examples. And I wanted to give you an idea of approximately how many photographs it takes to create these works. So this piece took 28 photos. And this piece took 10 photos. This piece took 20 photos. This one was 10 photos. And you'll notice that some students are keeping their edges straight, and some students are letting their edges be jagged. This photo, or this artwork, took 20 photos. Your assignment. Step 1 is to decide on a scene. Choose a location that you think would be interesting. For example, a landscape, a well-lit room, a building. In this example, there is a beautiful flowering cherry tree. Step 2. Imagine dividing your scene into a grid. A 3x3 grid works well for most scenes, but it's up to you. So you could add more grid lines if you want to in your imagination. Remember, 10 photos is a B, 15 photos is an A-, and 20 photos is an A. Step 3. Take a photo of each area of your scene. For example, take a photo of area 1, area 2, area 3, etc. until you have at least 9 photos. These photos should overlap into other areas. Don't worry about lining up the edges. Just take a photo in the general area of each section. In fact, there should be some overlap because that's what makes the final artwork look interesting, is where it doesn't quite match up. Here's an example of what your area photos might look like. Make sure you get a photo of each area of your scene so you don't have any gaps when you put them together. You could even take some extras around your scene. For example, some sky photos or some ground photos. It might be fun to use some later when you make your collage. Step 4. Make your collage in Photoshop. Watch the tutorial in Google Classroom. Here's an example of what the finished Photo Cubism collage might look like. And there will be a video posted for that. That's it, everyone. Have fun!